Tonight's episode of Legacy Battle is brought to you by Atlas Benefits.
Atlas Benefits has solutions for your insurance needs. Atlas Benefits can help you obtain Medicare, health, or life insurance and employee benefits. You can find them on the web at www.atlasbenefits.com.
Or you can contact Rob Ducey or Roy Smith at 727-600-2892 and mention Legacy Battle Podcast. Atlas Benefits has all the solutions for your insurance needs. Enjoy the show. This is Legacy Battle. Make sure you hit subscribe on whatever you're listening to. YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Safari, Google Podcasts, iTunes, Apple, Facebook. We're on everything. Make sure you hit it up. I'm Michael Adams, your creator of Legacy Battle. My panelists tonight from the Gridiron Battle Zone and Ravens season ticket holder, Dion Reed, Penn State Collegiate All-Star, Kevin Adams, and from Steelers Nation South, Rollo Cawthon. Our special guest tonight, he was a USA Today All American. He's a second-round pick out of Florida State, going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Also spent some time with the Cardinals later in his career. He was top 10 for fumble recoveries in 2006. Also had a pick six. And he's a two-time Super Bowl winner. So former cornerback Bryant Mcfadden. Bryant, thank you for coming on tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely love that background. That is maybe the greatest background we've had on this show in 60 episodes. That's awesome. Love it.
I appreciate it.
So tonight's debate, we're going to jump into this. It's going to be the greatest single season defense. So if you're a defensive guy, you're going to love this show. If you're an offensive guy, watch it anyways and go to the archives and check out the episode with Richmond Webb when we did the offenses. So we're going to start out tonight. Well, let's start from way back to the present. So we're going to go 1976, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Unfortunately, this is the only team that did not win the Super Bowl on this list, but it's still, in my opinion, the best defense of all time. 76 Steelers had 5 APR pros, 2 first-teamers, 3 second-teamers. Ham and Lambert were both on the first team. Edwards, Joe Green, and Mike Wagner were on the second team. They had 22 total interceptions, 24 fumble recovers for 46 total takeaways. The team were coming out back-to-back Super Bowls, but they started 1-4, and it wasn't looking good for them. But over the last 9 games, they gave up 3.1 points per game. That was incredible, because over the first 4 or 5 games, they gave up 22 points per game. And 8 of those last 9 games, they didn't allow a TD. They surrendered only 28 total points, and only 1 game of those last 9 did they give up more than 10 points. The opponents only averaged 2.9 yards per carry over those last 9 games. And an unknown journeyman named Mike Krusek went 6-0 because of that defense. He didn't throw a single touchdown pass. They went 6-0 in his starts. They went into Indy. They played Indy in the playoffs, who at the time was the #1 scoring offense and total offense, and they held them to 14 points to basically beat them down. But in that game, they lost Rocky Blyer and Franco Harris, 2,000-yard rushers, which hindered them the next week when they played Oakland. And so, unfortunately, they fell 24-7. But the defense didn't allow a touchdown for 22 quarters. They had 5 shutouts. And the names that they had on that defense, Blunt, Lambert, Green, all-time great. Some of the all-time greatest defensive players were on those teams. And that's why they're my choice for top defense.
So, Brian, you were a Steeler for a long time. I'm sure some of these guys were around every once in a while. I mean, what are your thoughts on that 76 defense, but also specifically, you played corner. What are your thoughts on Mel Blount?
I love Mel Blount. I actually had Mel Blount on my podcast, and he highlighted that 76 season. It felt like that was one of the best teams he was ever a part of, especially on the defensive side. But because of injuries, they weren't able to get to win a championship. I think statistically speaking, is one of the best defenses that we've seen in the NFL. Now, granted, the times have changed when you look at offensive play, but based on what they were going against, based on what the norm was offensively, they shut it down. I don't know if there's one defense ever that has assembled so many Hall of Famers. I know it's a lot of numbers, a lot of players, but I don't know if there's one defense at one given time, one particular season, has had as many Hall of Famers as that 76 defense. And also, too, the pressure of losing your starting quarterback in Terry Bradshaw, and knowing that offensively you might not get the same production you've grown accustomed to. And you know what? We're going to win ball games for our offense. Not a lot of teams can do that and be able to have a successful year. The only knock on that 76 team is that they didn't win a championship. I think if they won a championship, there's no argument. I know Mike Tomlin told us in 2008, we had like a historically great year defensively. First team to ever hold 13 straight opponents under 300 yards. And he said, if you ever want to be in the discussion of one of the greatest defenses to ever do it, you got to win a championship. You got to win a championship. So that's the only knock for that 76 team. They didn't get a chance to win a championship. But it wasn't because they weren't good enough. But, injuries played a big part in that not happening.
And I will say our teams that we're representing, other than the Steelers, had a little bit harder road in the fact that they had to play 2 extra games, 16-game seasons. So,
yep.
So we don't know what would have happened in those second 2 games. But let's move on to the 1985 Chicago Bears, and that is represented by me. So this is a team that went 15-1, which is the second best record in NFL history, basically, behind New England's 16-0, and Miami was 14-0, I believe. So 2 undefeated teams. There was some teams that have been 15-1, but this is right up there. So they also had the most lopsided Super Bowl win in history in '85 when they absolutely annihilated the New England Patriots. That was like pre-Tom Brady, of course. Can't see my hat here, but pre that, so way before that. And they had a defensive player win the Super Bowl MVP, Richard Dent. So that's not something that's happened a lot in NFL history. Defensive player winning the Super Bowl MVP. So that's pretty big in my opinion. But so they had 6 defenders make the Pro Bowl. Dent, obviously, Dan Hampton, Steve McMichael, Otis Wilson, Mike Singletary, and Dave Duerson. And then they had another All-Pro at safety, which was Gary Fenwick. So absolutely stacked on that defense. They also had the rookie, William the Refrigerator Perry. I mean, he had some pretty good years there for a while. I mean, he's famous for other reasons, of course, but I mean, when he started his career, he was really good. This defense only gave up 198 points, and that was for an average of 12.4. Those were both number 1 in the league in '85. They were also number 1 in yards allowed per game at 258.4 and number 1 with 54 takeaways. So they were definitely getting their team the ball back quite often. Mike Singletary won the Defensive Player of the Year. Ditka was the Coach of the Year. We all know Ditka was, defensive-minded. Even though he played tight end, he was definitely a defensive-minded coach. And then in the playoffs, you go in the playoffs, they shut out the Giants in the first round. They shut out the Rams in the next round. And they win the Super Bowl 46-10. So they only give up 10 points in that entire playoffs. And then there's something this is my last stat that I'm going to give on this. Your schedule is based off of what happened the season before. The Bears were first the season before. So they played a first-place schedule in that 1985 year. Whereas the Steelers, they did play a first-place schedule, but they only played 14 games. Kevin's Seahawks, who we're going to talk about soon, played a second-place schedule, and Dion's Ravens played a third-place schedule. So, in my opinion, the Bears had the hardest schedule that year of the teams we're discussing tonight. Bryant, 15-1, Super Bowl blowout, defensive player wins the Super Bowl MVP. the Super Bowl shuffle. I mean, the Bears were just famous. What are your thoughts on the Chicago Bears of '85?
They're my number one. I know we have a few other defenses to highlight, but they're my number one based on some of the big time points you were able to give us. You talked about the 2 shutouts in the postseason. That has never been done before. That's never been done before. They shut out the New York Football Giants. They gave up 180 yards in that ball game. Then they played the Los Angeles Rams. At that time, they were a top tier. I think the Rams were the number 2 seed in the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken, behind
they were
the Bears. With Eric Dickerson, a handful of elite offensive players, they only surrendered 130 yards to the Rams. Think about that. Only 130 yards. So you played against playoff caliber teams that had championship aspirations, and you gave up, 310 yards in 2 ball games. Not to mention, in postseason play, not including the championship ball game, including the championship, if I'm not mistaken, the numbers serve me correctly, they surrendered 10 points in the postseason run, including the Super Bowl, and they had 10 takeaways. They had the amount of points they surrendered, they provided the same amount of takeaways in 3 games in postseason play. 3 Hall of Famers. You talked to Dan Hampton, Dent, and Singletary, Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, the 46 defense, something that we never seen before, right? They revolutionized the game defensively when it came to schemes, when it came to just dominating that scheme. They played a defense no one else can really play at all. So me personally, you talked about the schedule, going 15-1, and the only game they lost was to the Dolphins on the road with a top-level prime player in Dan Marino. Outside of that, watching Chicago back then was kind of boring because they defense would give up anything.
Buddy Ryan, I believe, came up with that 4-6 incredible scheme, but I think they had more swag than everybody we're talking about tonight too. So, but we'll see how the vote goes a little bit later. Let's move on to the year 2000. The Baltimore Ravens, represented by the Baltimore Ravens season ticket holder, Dion Reed.
Yeah, so I'm also a huge college football fan, so I wanted to get the shot of McFadden, in the background. But let me just adjust this camera right here as we talk about the best team, best defense in all the NFL. Okay, so as you said, we're now moving on to a 16-game schedule. So we're talking about more yards possibly against a team that's only been 5 years old at the time. And in their 5th year, this is what they were able to do. They gave up a league record of 970 rushing yards of the whole season, which is an average of 60.6 yards a game. They beat the record by 186 yards. Let me say that again. They beat the record by 186 yards. So had they played 3 more regular season games, they would have matched the record. They only gave up 165 points in the whole season, only allowed 5 rushing touchdowns and 2.7 yards per carry, only allowed 11 passing touchdowns. They led the league in 49 turnovers, 26 fumbles recovered, 23 interceptions. They had the Defensive Player of the Year, 3 Pro Bowls that year, and 4 All-Pros. They had the defensive interception leader, and Dwayne Starks also the pass deflection leader. Although we're just talking about that season, altogether for the players that have played that season, they have 23 All-Pros altogether. But not just what's on the field. Let's talk about the coaching staff. For the defensive coordinator, Marvin Lewis went on to then have a long tenure with the Cincinnati Bengals. Rex Ryan. Like, come on now. We got Mike Smith, who coached down in Atlanta, and he was coaching the defensive line, the linebacker coach, Jack Del Rio. So not only were we producing on the field, we also ended up producing for other future teams' head coaches. Although we're talking about the regular season, let's move on to the playoffs. First playoff game in Ravens history. 21-3 against Denver. Go on to the divisional round, 24-10 for the Super Bowl favorite Tennessee Titans. Go on to the AFC Championship game, 16-3. Then we go to the Super Bowl. We went 34-7. That only 7 came on the kick return. This defense was able to put up points that the offense was not. We want to talk about going through a drought. This team, 16 quarters without scoring an offensive touchdown, and still managed to go 2-2 during that time span. Some of the players that we had, Ron Woodson, Ray Lewis, Sam Adams, Terry the Goose, Dwayne Starks, Herring, like these are players who set the golden standard for playing like a Raven. So that's my case for the 2000 Ravens.
So, Bryant, you played against a lot of these guys that were still around in 2005. Baltimore, Pittsburgh, everybody knows that's probably one of the biggest rivalries in football. But also, this was the only team we're talking about tonight that was really carried by their defense. So how much extra pressure is there on a defense when you know basically you're going to have to win a lot of games for your team? And what are your thoughts on that Ravens 2000 team?
Well, it's a lot of pressure when you know that. When you know that's the circumstances that you're in, you have no room for error, which makes what they did so important. They had 4 shutouts in the regular season, 4 shutouts. And of course, we heard about the stats in the postseason, only allowing 23 points. That's huge. 4 shutouts. You know, now it's hard to see a defense get 2 shutouts. I know Buffalo just got 2 shutouts in this current season right now, but they probably won't get another shutout. The Baltimore Ravens had 4 shutouts. Not to mention they were 12-4. They won a championship with Tony Banks and Trent Dilfer at the quarterback position. Think about that, right? And no knock on those 2 quarterbacks. They were professional quarterbacks. They weren't like top-level guys at the position, though. You know what I'm saying? Best case scenario, they probably would be middle-level guys. Now, when you look at Super Bowl champions, you got a guy at the quarterback position that we probably pretty much all would hang our hat on in winning a ball game if we had to. They won championships. They won that championship with their defense. Ray Lewis was spectacular. You talked about Dwayne Starks. You had Chris McAllister on that team as well. Bullware. I mean, you got the way they ran their defense. They were a physical, imposing unit. It's hard to not have them in your top 3 or top 5. What they did and knowing the pressure that they were under, it speaks volumes on how consistent they were and how dominant. And one thing I love about that unit, they effaced the ground and pound attack. You couldn't run the football on them. And good luck in trying to pass with the guys in the secondary and the way they brushed the passer. So they deserve to be in this conversation hands down. I kind of already gave my number 1 already, but I have no issue with Baltimore. And if someone said their Ravens 2000 defense is number 1, that's a legit argument as well.
Rollo, you have something you want to add?
I remember the Steelers had 5 shutouts in 76. If I had more in less games. And then I had another point. I just forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, 5 shutouts. I got the point. The Baltimore Ravens weren't the top statistically defense in total yards. Tennessee was. Tennessee was the top defense in yards given up that year. Baltimore was behind them.
Okay.
Well, and just to add to Brian's point about the quarterback play for Baltimore that year, Trent Dilfer, he did get it done that year, but he had so many opportunities in Tampa with Tampa 2, and he didn't get it done. So that should tell you how good that Ravens defense was. So let's move on to our final team tonight, and that's going to be the 2013 Seattle Seahawks.
So you already made your decision almost there, Bryant. So I figure it's between my defense and the 85 Bears because I already know that my team is better than the Ravens and the Steelers that we talked about. So I just got to convince you that we're better than the Bears, the 2013 Seahawks. And by the way, they have the best nickname, Legion of Boom. I mean, come on. Greatest nickname. So it was their 4th season under Pete Carroll and their 38th in the NFL. They won 10 of their first 11 games that season, and they finished their franchise record for best record at the end of the regular season, 13-3. And this was hands down one of the best defenses in NFL history. They led the league in points allowed, only 231, yards allowed, 4,378, and takeaways at 39. They're the first team to do that since the 1985 Chicago Bears to lead all three of those categories. They also led in passing yards allowed, rushing touchdowns allowed, and yards per play. They had a 186-plus point differential, which was the best in franchise history, so they're setting franchise marks as well. They allowed less than 10 points in 7 games that season. The 2013 Seahawks had a 14.4 points allowed per game in the regular season, which was the lowest in franchise history. Their defense was led by Sherman, Chancellor, Thomas. All three were Pro Bowlers. All three were all pros. They were arguably the deepest defense in NFL history. They were the most feared defense in the past decade prior to that year and reached similar heights, if not higher, than some of the great defenses in previous years. Sherman had led the NFL with 8 interceptions. The secondary was best in league history. The front 7 had Averill, Bennett combining for 16.5 sacks on the edge. Bobby Wagner, over 100 tackles. Clemens, 4.5 sacks. Malcolm Smith, he actually only started half the season that year, and he got the Super Bowl MVP, which ties what the Chicago Bears had with their defenseman getting the MVP in the Super Bowl. He had a fumble recovery, 10 tackles, and an interception return for a touchdown in that Super Bowl. NBC Sports ranked this defense the third most dominant defense. In Super Bowl 48, they defeated and crushed the first place Denver Broncos 43-8 for their first Super Bowl victory. Denver finished that season 13-3 as well for the second straight year. They had the best offense in the NFL, leading the league in points scored at 606, which was the highest total in NFL history. Yards gained over 7,000 yards. Manning posted one of the best seasons by a quarterback in NFL history, leading the league in completions, attempts, yards, and touchdown passes. His 5,477 passing yards and 55 touchdowns both set NFL records. His total 450 completions was second highest in NFL history, and his 115 passer rating ranked second in the league that season. They had 2 wide receivers over 1,000 yards, a running back over 1,000 yards. The Seahawks had a harder opponent in their Super Bowl match. Yes, the 85 Bears played the Patriots, which, might I add, their quarterback that season only threw for about 2,100 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 17 interceptions. And their backup wasn't any better. So no receivers over 1,000 yards, no running backs over 1,000 yards. Chicago Bears had an easier game in the Super Bowl. The Seahawks had a tougher mountain to climb, and they overcame it. They're the better defense than the 85 Bears.
I didn't see that game coming. I thought the Broncos were going to roll, but I was shocked. So I'm going to give you that one, Kevin. I just want to throw this in, though. You mentioned the Patriots and the quarterback. Their quarterbacks actually split between Steve Grogan and Tony Eason. So, they split time. But, Bryant, let's come to you. Let's talk about the Legion of Boom. I mean, Richard Sherman, maybe one of the greatest corners in history, still going down. He's down now with Tom Brady on the Buccaneers, of course. But what are your thoughts on that defense? And did that Super Bowl surprise you?
Number one, I love that defense. I love, the tone setter in Cam Chancellor. I love the guys in the front. They flew around. They imposed their will on any offense they faced. You talked about some of the big key guys they had on that defense, and they just played together. They were an unselfish group, and you saw it. And I was surprised. I wanted Seattle to win because I always cheer for a defensive-minded team, where the defense is kind of what you hang your hat on. So I'm a bit biased when it comes to that element. But yeah, I was surprised. But I can tell you this much: when I saw the first play that went for a safety, I'm like, okay, this might be a long night for Denver. That's a great way to start off. And then you get a special teams touchdown from Percy Harvin as well. You get a defensive score and a special team score. The likelihood of you winning that ball game is likely, very likely, and they were able to do so. I think this is the because I already kind of showed my hand earlier about who my number one is. Seattle didn't have the defensive player of the year on their team, right? And I don't remember who won it in 2013, but it wasn't a Seattle Seahawks. Chicago 85, hey, Mike Singletary is considered one of the best linebackers to ever do it. Period. Like, he's like the golden standard, and he was a defensive player of the year. It's hard to kind of trump what Chicago did. And I know you talked about the quarterback play in the Super Bowl, but if you look at the quarterback and offensive play they went against in the postseason, where they just didn't allow anything. I mean, you got the Giants. If I'm not mistaken, I think Phil Simms, that was that cold game in Chicago. Phil Simms was there. Yeah, he was a quarterback. He was healthy. Couldn't get anything going. Eric Dickerson couldn't find any daylight. So they kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit based on what they allowed in the Super Bowl. But it's hard to trump that 85 Bears, man. It is, man. It's hard to trump that 85 Bears.
Well, before we move into our vote, let's just give a quick shout out to the teams that just missed the list tonight. That's going to be the 68 Colts, the 86 Giants, of course, LT, and the 2002 Buccaneers, the Tampa 2 that absolutely annihilated the Raiders in the Super Bowl. So pretty close, but they just missed our list tonight. Let's move into our vote. Remember, guys, you cannot vote for your own team. Kevin, you got first vote tonight.
If I vote with my head, because I have a feeling I know how this is going to go, I would not vote for the Bears. I do feel that the Bears are better than the other two defenses that were represented besides mine, because I think mine's better than the Bears. But I'm going to go with the Bears.
Okay, so I'm going to go next. And I want to say this, Rallo, about your 76 Steelers. If I was voting for a 5-6 year period tonight, it would be the Steel Curtain. No questions asked. But one single season, I can't give it to them. And as someone who grew up in Pittsburgh and as a Steelers fan, it breaks my heart that I'm going to now vote for a Baltimore Ravens team.
Ooh.
Because I do believe that 2000 Ravens defense, when I saw them all year, of course, but when I saw that Super Bowl against the Giants, I don't even know if the Giants had like 150 yards the whole game. I mean, it was insane. So I'm going one for the Ravens. Dion.
Beautiful pick, by the way. That's a beautiful pick. But no, so I am struggling because the stories I hear with the 85 Bears, I didn't even know all the statistics as far as the postseason till tonight. But I'm going to go to the Seahawks, but let me explain why. We're talking about
Smart man.
an era. We're talking about an era where the marketing is just full points now. Like, you know what I mean? We're talking about Peyton Manning on what could have been his last ride had he won the Super Bowl. He probably would have retired after that game. And you're talking about an offense, a prolific offense that had multiple 1,000-yard receivers and 1,000-yard rushing. Arguably one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. And for them to only score 8, the Seahawks traveled across country because that was the first, I think it was the first Super Bowl in Northeast, right? Northeast region, I'm not sure. But for them to do what they did, not just in that Super Bowl, but all season long, I don't fear teams. I fear the Seahawks. So I'm going to go with the
Okay. Rollo?
I watched those Ravens as a Steeler fan all season when they come up. But as a kid, that 85 Bears was fun. I mean, they were fun. The Super Bowl Shuffle and Walter Payton with the Kangaroos. That 85 Bears was fun. So I got to go 85 Bears.
Bryant, we go to you. Who are you taking?
You know who I'm picking. I'm sorry. I went too early. I couldn't hold my peace. I got to go 85 Bears. I just the dominant performances they were able to do and the postseason run. Like, we never seen that before, and we have yet to see it again. We've yet to see it again. Shut out 2 teams in the postseason, only allowed 10 points in the entire postseason, right? That's unheard of. I don't think that will ever be done again. And 3 Hall of Famers and a revolutionized defense that we might not ever see again as well, along with the Defensive Player of the Year and their schedule. You talked about the year before they finished number 2, so they had a top-level schedule going into 85 because of the success in 84. So they played some of the best the NFL had to offer because of how well they played the year before. And they went 15-1. They went 15-1. Think about that. So
I think everybody wanted that rematch in the Super Bowl with Miami when New England took out Miami in that championship game. There, like, everyone was just shocked because they were hoping for another Bears-Dolphins matchup. That would have been an insane game, but we didn't get it, unfortunately. So,
yep.
So win tonight for the 85 Bears. I got the win. Let's move into our Q&A here for Bryant about his career. Since I got the win, I get first question. I haven't won in a while, so that's kind of nice. Bryant, well, you mentioned your podcast. Tell us where we can find your podcast and what's it about.
Thank you. Well, you can find my podcast anywhere where podcasts are found. Apple, Spotify, Stitcher. We also have a YouTube channel, All Things Covered, YouTube, or just go to youtube.com/allthingscovered. Most recent guest episode that we're dropping tomorrow is Dalvin Cook. He's joining us for this upcoming episode. We drop at least 1 episode a week. We also usually have a few bonus episodes that we add into our weekly drop. And it's just been going good. We get a chance to tap in with, current around the league news with Patrick Peterson. Of course, he's injured now. He had an opportunity of talking about his injury, the expectations of getting back into the lineup sooner than later, talking about the overall season. Some notable guests that we've had on. I mean, we've currently, I think we're almost approaching 80 episodes. And throughout our 80 episodes, we probably had, and I'm throwing out the number, it could be 80, give or take, but we've probably had 4 episodes where we didn't have a guest. Notable guests from the NFL, Tyrann Mathieu, OBJ, Juju Smith-Schuster, Jameis Winston, Derwin James, Devin White, Levante David, DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Tomlin. It's been a lot of guys. Nick Saban, we had Nick Saban on, Shaquille O'Neal.
Oh, nice.
Master P, Ice Cube, Fabulous. Even for the ladies, we had Joy Taylor on, Chanel West Coast, Mel Blunt, Anelius Williams. It's been a lot. But it's been real fun. I enjoy it. So I appreciate the question. And you guys got any free time, go ahead and listen. Give us a like, a comment, and subscribe as well.
Definitely going to check that out. Rollo, go ahead.
All right. I'm rocking the 20 right now, bro.
Appreciate it.
One of my favorite games of all time was the 2005 divisional playoff game against the Colts. One of my favorite games. I was on pins and needles, jubilee. I had all the emotions. 2-part question. When Bettis fumbled that ball, what was your reaction? And then that last play before the Vinatieri field goal, you should have had that pick. What happened?
Yeah.
What happened?
So the first part of your question, when Jerome fumbled, we were in the state of shock. We were so busy, and you being a Steeler fan like you are, you remember we played the Colts early in the season, and it was Monday Night Football. They beat us like 26-3. It was horrible, right? We got embarrassed. We knew we didn't play our best game, so we wanted a chance to see them again. And at that time, they were rolling. So Bill Cowher, and that was in the RCA Dome, right? It wasn't at the Lucas Oil where they currently plays the RCA Dome. Bill Cowher in the locker room said, don't worry. In January, we're going to be right back in this same locker room. It's going to be a different outcome. We heard him, and we listened, and we believed it. It was like, yeah, no question. So going back to that game, we had an extraordinary game plan. If you remember that game, how we started off offensively, it was all passes, play action, taking shots, being aggressive, not the normal offense that we've showcased. Defensively, sending pressure. They had no answer for us. So going to that last drive offensively, we were too busy talking so much trash to the fans because they helped us so much the first time we went there. We wanted some get back. So we're not even watching the game behind us. We're too busy talking crazy to their fans. They cussing us out. We going back and forth. Go home. Y'all season over. Because remember, that Colts team, they were like 13-3. They were rolling. I mean, the Hall of Famers, you had Peyton, Edgerrin, Marvin, eventually Reggie going to get in there. You had Jeff Saturday. You had Dallas Clark. You had Freeney. You had Mathis. You had Brackets. You had Bob Sanders. I mean, you had some real guys, some go-getters on that team. So we just talking trash, and we just heard the fans went crazy. So when they went crazy, we like, why are they going crazy for us scoring? Because we thought we were going to score. We was on the goal line. We're like, they not stopping JB from not scoring. So we like, man, they going crazy. Why they cheering for our touchdown? So we happen to look back. We see freaking Nick Harper with the ball in his hand. So we go from what? Wait a minute. And then we like, oh, get him, Ben, dog. Get him. Ben gets him down. And now we got to go get our helmet. They're like, defense, you up. So we get in the huddle, and James Ferrier, who was our middle linebacker, he was the play caller. He's looking to the sideline like Dick LeBeau. He's like, Dickie, give me something. Give us a call. Our sideline's in a state of shock. We're like, oh, freak. And now I was the only rookie in the game on defense. The whole time I was the only rookie. And I'm in my mind, I'm like, oh, I already know where he's going. I said, I already know where he's going. So we call it fire zone. Fire zones for us, for cornerbacks, it's straight man-to-man. And we're trying to scramble to get into our position, so we're not even disguising anything. So now Peyton knows exactly what we're doing. He knows exactly where we want to go to football. First play was a dig route to Reggie. Bam! Caught Reggie in stride. I came up make the tackle. I'm like, oh, boy. I said, oh, Matt, you better get ready, man. It's going to be a long drive. The second play, he threw the opposite side. I'm like, oh, boy. Third, and you remember he used to go kind of fast. He'd go up-tempo, no huddle. The next play, I'm like, I already know. I felt like he's going to take a shot, and everything was quiet. When the ball snapped, when Peyton got the ball in his hands, I heard the crowd. But when he launched the ball in my direction, I didn't hear nothing. Yeah, I didn't hear anything, right? So what helped me out in that situation, as a defender playing cornerback, anytime you have a man concept, you're taught to turn into the wide receiver because you're playing man. You always want to keep your eyes on the man. In this situation, something told me to zone turn. So when I zone turn, I open up so I can look at the quarterback. And what that allowed me to do was I was able to locate the football before Reggie. And that's why you see so many corners lose 50-50 balls or get beat down the field because they don't locate the football first. Usually when receivers locate the football, they can attack it before we can because they see it before we see it. But when I zone turn, I literally see the ball coming from Peyton's hand. And I see where the ball is going, the trajectory of the ball. So now I'm trying to meet the ball to the spot, but also be mindful where I got Reggie is because you see that picture behind you. Reggie still was trying to go get it. He was still trying to go get it. So when I saw the ball, everything was quiet. It was slow motion. I know people say that all the time, like it gets quiet, things become slow. Literally, that's how it was for me. And I locate the ball, and when I went up, as you see, Reggie was still trying to go get it. And I just kept clawing at the ball. And even when we hit the turf, he was still trying to catch the ball. So now when that happened, I didn't celebrate because it was like I was still in the state of shock. Like, if you see the highlight, I'm going right back because I know we got another play. And then the very next play, Peyton came back again. I'm like, oh. But luckily, they had some communication issues because Reggie ran a stop and go. Peyton threw the stop, and that's the one you were talking about. I couldn't get my hands almost all the way underneath it. And my mom like, oh, shoot. I'm like, man, I just caused us the game because I picked that ball up. Vanderjack don't even come out. And at that time, Vanderjack was a very, very good, reliable kicker. And we were like, and to be quite fairly honest with you, if we had to go into overtime, just the momentum that changed in favor of the Colts, it would have been tough for us in overtime. Because you remember back then in those overtime rules, the first team that gets the football, it's about who kicks the field goal first.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't know what would have happened, but we didn't want to go into overtime because the momentum just shifted. long story short, Vanderjagt came out, missed the field goal, and I was just like, wow. And I'm gonna tell you the good thing about that night that I never forget. I'm a Laker fan, right? So when we played the Colts and when we got back to Pittsburgh, that's the same night Kobe scored 81 points against the Raptors. So I was like, man, we destined to win the Super Bowl now. There's nothing else. I came up with a huge pass breakup on 2 plays to help us win, and my guy just scored 81 points. I was mad he didn't allow him to get 100. He was supposed to get 100. So that's how that happened.
Kevin, go ahead.
I want to take you to college. You played for great coach Bobby Bowden, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts on Bobby and what it was like playing for him at Florida State.
Man, a living legend. When Bobby came to recruit me, he came to my house before we got into the in-home visit. The teachers at my school found out that he was coming, so they sent so much memorabilia for him to sign. So I had to ask Bobby. I was nervous, like, Bobby, I'm sorry, Coach Bowden, it's not me, but it's a lot of people in my school. They've heard you were coming. Would you mind signing some of these pieces? So we did a 30-minute autograph signing before we got into the home visit, and he was okay with it. But he sat down, just, a humble individual, straightforward, had his beliefs, had his morals, and he was just a living legend, man. He was just like talking to greatness, you know what I'm saying? And he wanted me to be a part of his football program. And when I got there, Bobby didn't say a whole lot, but he knew what was going on. He always knew what was going on. At halftime, he'll always say, seniors won't let us lose. If you're a senior, it's your job to not allow us to lose this ball game. He meant a lot to all of us. You know what I mean? Just the respect, the humility that he displayed, and he wanted us to exercise daily. It wasn't just about football. It was about, religion. It was about academics. It was about a family. All of those things under one umbrella, and understanding that. And, he lived a full life. He touched a lot of lives. You know what I'm saying? Very, very positive. And yeah, Bobby was a cool dude, super cool. Didn't really raise his voice too much, but if he did, it was a big deal. And like I said, when he came to my house, man, it was like watching someone who didn't walk, but they float. It's just like you just floating, guy. Like, shit, that's Bobby. Like, wow. Yeah, but it was a cool experience.
Kevin knows what that's like. He went to Penn State, Paterno, so he. Dion, go ahead.
I want to go back to Rollo's question. Well, first of all, that was the best sports story I ever heard, because that was literally the only moment I actually felt bad for the Steelers. When that ball went out, I said, "Oh no! Wait, no!" I actually felt bad.
Yeah.
But Rollo kind of picked on you a little bit about not making that interception. But I want to ask you about your first career interception. And obviously, that's not the only job of a defensive back, but I believe it was against Tony Maddox. What was it like to get your first interception?
First career interception actually was against Jacksonville and Byron Leftwich.
Wow, okay.
He left. So, funny story, in that ball game, that was 2005, Jacksonville Jaguars in Heinz Field, kind of cold, a little snowy. Deshae was hurt, and I didn't get the first nod to go in as a nickel corner. I felt some type of way. Chidi Awoma was the first player to get in. So Chidi ended up getting hurt in his hamstring like in the second half. And I remember Bill Cowell came to me on the sideline, "Do you know your stuff?" I'm like, "Come on, coach, man. Stop trying." Yeah, I know my stuff. I wasn't screwing up in practice. I'm like, "Yeah, coach, I know." "You sure? You're going in." I'm like, "Oh, freak." So I go in the football game, and the first person I line up on was freaking Jimmy Smith. I was like, "Wow, man." Yeah. I said, "Oh, shoot." And this is Jimmy Smith, who's toward the end of his career, but he still is a dog, a straight dog. Man, and I grew up watching Jimmy Smith. Man, I saw Jimmy Smith give Baltimore like 200 yards in Baltimore. You know the game I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's
like he had like 50 fantasy points or something crazy. Like they couldn't stop him. Like I see Jimmy Smith take the top off of Hall of Famers, like everything. I'm looking, oh man, this is Jimmy Smith. So for me, that's my first game, and I was kind of starstruck, but it was more like, hey, man, don't be out here playing around. You've seen Jimmy Smith take Chris McAllister to who's a who yard, and it's nothing. So, man, I'm covering Jimmy Smith. And to this day, I say he's one of the toughest coverers I've ever had in the National Football League because he would just, luckily enough for me, they didn't throw him the ball. He was open every route he ran against me. They just didn't throw him the ball. I'm happy they didn't because I probably wouldn't have been out there long because he was doing me bad out there, really. But in the fourth quarter, Tommy Maddox is at quarterback. Something happened to Ben. Tommy Maddox at quarterback. Offense is not really doing anything. So in the fourth quarter, they were driving, right? They need like a field goal to win. The game is tied. So we called Diamond Wake, Weak Cobra White, which is a corner blitz from the short side of the football field. So Ike and Troy was blitzing from the boundary, and I was to the field side, and we were playing a quarter technique, basically man-to-man, unless the wide receiver runs a 5-yard stop route, 5-yard China route, which is an in route. So the receiver was Reggie Williams, former first rounder from Washington, the Huskies, right? So you remember their receiving core, they had Matt Jones from Arkansas, Reggie Williams, Woolfolk from Virginia Tech. I can't remember who else. But anyway, I was on Reggie's side, and he ran a go route. And it's kind of similar to what I did in the Colts game. B left threw it up there. He kind of left it up there to dry a little bit, and I was able to come down with basically a game-saving interception that led the game to go into overtime. And I was like, wow. At the time, it didn't. And you know what? I had the football up here too. The first interception I got, I had it up here. But it didn't really hit home how big of a play that was because I was just in the moment. I'm like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. But long story short, we go into overtime and we lose that ball game. Rasheed Mathis, who used to be the Pittsburgh Steelers killer, a pick six to win it for Jacksonville. But that was my first interception against Byron Leftwich, who also became my teammate later on in life.
Yep.
Kevin, I'm going to give you another one because I shorted you on the John LeClaire show. So go ahead.
Sure. All right. I want to take you to the second Super Bowl victory, Tampa Bay, and against the Cardinals. Two great plays in that game. You have Harrison running back the 99-yard interception return, and then you had the amazing pass by Roethlisberger to Santonio Holmes in the corner of the end zone there. What was that Super Bowl like for you guys to get that second one in, I think it was 3 years? Well, what was that Super Bowl like for you?
It was amazing. So that was year 4 for me, right? So that was the 4th year. So I played in 2 Super Bowls in 4 years. I was like, I'm thinking that's how it's supposed to be. Like every other year we have a hiatus from the game and then we're back in it. But that play before halftime it kind of won the game for us. And the reason why I say that is because they were getting ready to score. Worst case scenario, they were going to score 3 points, right? And they were getting the ball after halftime. But if they score a touchdown, so at that time, I think we were up 10-7. 10-7. So instead of going down in half 14-10, we go up 17-7. That's huge. That is huge. I mean, or going into half 10-10. You know what I'm saying? They had settle for a field goal. But you guys watch football all the time. Usually when they run that pick route, it's a completion. You know what I mean? And if James Harrison wasn't there, it would have been completed. But with James doing what he did, not doing what he was supposed to do, just doing his own thing, led to us taking points away from the Cardinals and putting points on the scoreboard for us. So it's basically a 14-point swing. So we went into halftime with all the momentum. Like, if they would have scored, I mean, it would have made it very, very difficult for us in the second half because they were getting the football back. And that offense was loaded. You know what I mean? They potentially have 4 Hall of Famers on that offense. Kurt already in the Hall of Fame. Edrin in the Hall. Larry's going to get in the Hall. Anquan's going to get in the Hall as well. They have 4 Hall of Famers. You know what I mean? So that was huge for us. And that's also, too, I'm trying to figure out something. I'm trying to figure out something. We just did a segment highlighting some of the best defenses in the NFL history. But how we don't even give any consideration to the 2008 Steelers? Because I heard all these different arguments about Dell. They had the toughest schedule. I don't know if y'all remember, but that 2008 year, we had the hardest schedule in the NFL. Had the hardest schedule in the NFL. At that time, people were picking us to finish best case scenario third in our own division. They were picking Baltimore ahead of us. They were picking Cleveland ahead of us. Because remember in 2007, Cleveland were 10-6. They had a few Pro Bowlers. We held 13 straight opponents to under 300 yards. Under 300 yards. Played the NFC East. We played the NFC East that year. We played the AFC South along with the Chargers playing our division. And we had another non-divisional opponent as well. And we were 13-3. I'm just trying to figure out something. And then you saw what we did in the Super Bowl. Like I just named 4 Hall of Famers in the Super Bowl matchup that we played against. And that offense was rolling, one of the best offenses in postseason play. Not to mention what we did in the playoffs. Who we beat in the playoffs? We beat the Chargers. Phillip Rivers, Hall of Famer. He will get in the Hall of Fame, right?
Right.
LaDainian Tomlinson, right? Gates, right? I mean, and then in the AFC Championship game, we played Baltimore. So I just threw that out there. So I just wanted to know what was going on.
But you did bring up 2 big names that you would have had to cover in that Super Bowl. So Bolden and Fitzgerald. So what was that game covering those 2 to win the Super Bowl?
Oh, well, I played with Quan at Florida State. So I knew what type of player he was. And during that year for them, Larry Fitzgerald was just a machine. Larry Fitzgerald was a machine in their playoff run. But for us, that was, anytime we had a player like that we were going against, that would usually be Ike Taylor's responsibility. And Ike did a real good job outside that fade route and then the long one that he caught. But it was a understanding that we didn't want to allow certain players for them to control the narrative of their offense. Anquan was like the muscle. You know what I mean? He was the guy that was going to give you all the physical nature you want. Larry was a guy who was big and physical, but he was a big playmaker for their offense. Not to mention, you can't forget about Steve Breston as well. They had 3 wide receivers that had over 1,000 yards. Yeah, so Anquan was physical, man. And tackling Anquan was like tackling a linebacker. And then for Larry, and then I ended up going to Arizona the next year, just seeing how hard Larry worked, man, was impressive. And, he's going to be our first battle when that time comes.
So I won the show tonight. Normally I would get final question, but I'm going to concede the final question to Rollo because he bleeds black and gold. Go ahead, Rollo.
One last question. Earlier I said it was Vinatieri. Just seemed like he was in the league that long. It was Vanderjack, but Vinatieri has been in the league like 62 years. But you played in 3 Super Bowls in 7 seasons. What was your most memorable moment in those Super Bowls?
I don't remember anything from the loss. I don't want to remember the loss. I've yet to watch that game in its entirety. I will never watch that game. But the first one of my most memorable moments outside of winning it was the national anthem. And I think Aretha Franklin, she sung it in Detroit, Motor City, where she was from, home of Motown. And I remember listening to her sing it, and I just started to reflect back as a child, like growing up, watching so many Super Bowls as a child, sitting on the floor, Indian style, just with a football in my hand, just watching it, and seeing so many different big name celebrities or musicians sing the national anthem, and seeing how it just affected the players at that time that were getting ready to go to battle. And then now, years later, I'm standing on the sideline. I'm getting ready to do what I used to watch grown men do, play in the Super Bowl. And I just started thinking back to when I was a child, playing outside with my cousins. Wasn't organized football, but just believing and hoping one day I can get a chance to do that. And just hearing her let it go. I remember she had on like a red or burgundy fur coat. And man, when I said she sung that song from her soul, and it touched my soul, it was like, man, this is it. All the hard work, all the dedication, all the battles mentally and physically that I went to, was going through, it all was worth it. So that was one thing that I remember. And the first one was the national anthem, Aretha Franklin. The second one was like, it's a little different because you kind of know what to expect. But when there's a few moments. I think when Santonio, when he made that catch, I felt like we were destined for bigger things. Like when he made that catch, and defensively, we knew we weren't going to let it down. We were like, game over. But when he made that catch, in my mind, I'm like, we can continue to do this, meaning get to championship ball games and win. And when Tone made that catch, it was like everything that we worked hard for, like training camp in Latrobe, the hot summers, the cold winters when it's November, your body's hurting, December is hurting, and just seeing the results. And Tone made that catch. It was like, man, this is what we're supposed to do. Like, this is what we're supposed to do. We just won 2 Super Bowls in 4 years, the right way. It was no Spygate. It wasn't none of that foolishness. We did it the right way, right? Oh, yeah. Why we can't keep doing it? And unfortunately, some guys left, you know what I mean, messed up the rotation a little bit. But that's one thing that I remember, man. It's like, man, we got to keep this. We got a close-knit group. Man, there's no reason why we can't be right back here. Not next year and the year after next. We give the league a year to get there. But every other year we should be there. And just how we came together when he made that catch, man, is something I never forget. And it always touched home whenever I see that catch from Santonio. Like, yo, that's something that we all work hard for and we all knew was going to happen.
Well, thank you so much to Bryant Mcfadden for joining us tonight. What an honor. Yeah. Awesome Steelers. Make sure you check out his podcast as well as hitting subscribe on whatever you're listening to this podcast on as well. Continue to grow those members lists on everything that we're on. So thank you for watching. Everybody, have a great night. God bless.